When Muhammad Ali refused to shake Clint Eastwood's hand in front of 12 million viewers on live television, the studio fell into a silence so heavy you could hear the camera operators breathing. Clint's hand hung in the air between them, steady and calm, while Ali's eyes burned with an anger that seemed to come from somewhere deeper than pride. The host stammered, trying to salvage what was supposed to be a light-hearted segment celebrating American legends. But this wasn't about entertainment anymore. This was about something that had been buried for 13 years, festering in silence, waiting for this exact moment to explode. What nobody in that studio knew, what even Ali himself didn't know, was that the man standing across from him had walked the same impossible path, had made the same soul-crushing choice, had paid a price that almost destroyed everything he'd built. And what Clint Eastwood said next, in a voice so quiet the microphones barely caught it, would shatter every assumption Ali had about Hollywood's toughest man and change how America understood courage forever. Because hidden in a 1968 military file, locked away in an archive that less than a dozen people had access to, was a document that connected these two men in a way that would shock the nation. A document that showed Clint Eastwood's name on the same list as Muhammad Ali's. The same list that had torn America apart. The same list that cost Ali his heavyweight title, his prime years, and nearly his freedom. Both men had faced the same choice during Vietnam. Both had said no when their country demanded yes. But only one of them had done it in front of the world. What Clint revealed in that frozen studio moment would either destroy the myth of Hollywood's greatest tough guy or prove that the hardest battles are often fought in complete silence. And it all started with 5 words nobody saw coming. If you want to know what those 5 words were and why they changed everything, stay with me because this story gets deeper than you can imagine. And hey, drop a comment and tell me where you're watching this from right now. To understand why Muhammad Ali refused that handshake, you have to go back to April 28, 1967. The Armed Forces Examining and Entrance Station in Houston, Texas. Ali had been called to report for induction into the United States Army. The room was crowded with young men, most of them barely 19 years old, about to be shipped to a war that was swallowing America's sons whole. When Ali's name was called, Cassius Marcellus Clay, he stood silent. They called it again. Silence. A third time. Nothing. That silence echoed across the entire country. Within hours, the New York State Athletic Commission stripped him of his heavyweight championship. The boxing authorities banned him from the sport he dominated. He was 25 years old, in the absolute prime of his career, and they took it all away. 5 years in federal prison loomed over him. The hate mail arrived in bags. Death threats became routine. Half of America called him a coward, a traitor, un-American. The other half saw a man willing to sacrifice everything for what he believed. But either way, everyone knew his name. Everyone knew his stand. Everyone knew the price he was paying. What Muhammad Ali never knew was that 400 miles away in Los Angeles, another American was about to face the same choice. Clint Eastwood sat in his agent's office in May 1968, holding his own draft notice. He was 38 years old, riding high on the success of the Dollars trilogy. The films that turned him from a TV cowboy into an international movie star. His agent's words were sharp and clear. Don't be stupid. Don't be Ali. This war is complicated, but your career doesn't have to be. Do a USO tour. Smile for the cameras. Play the patriot. That's all Hollywood needs from you. But Clint had been in the army before, back in 1951 during peacetime. He knew what the military machine looked like from the inside. And he knew he couldn't stand in front of cameras telling boys to go die for something he didn't believe in. So he did something that almost nobody knew about. Something that could have ended everything he'd worked for. He filed a formal objection to his draft notice based on moral opposition to the war. And then he waited for his world to collapse. What happened next to Clint Eastwood never made the newspapers. There were no press conferences, no public statements, no dramatic courthouse steps. Just a quiet destruction that happened behind closed doors in Hollywood. Warner Brothers canceled his 3-picture deal worth $2 million. His agent, the same one who told him not to be stupid, dropped him within 48 hours. His publicist quit, telling reporters that she couldn't represent someone who wouldn't defend his country. The scripts that had been flooding his manager's office dried up completely overnight. Journalists who got wind of the story off the record called him a coward in private conversations. Death threats started showing up at his home in Carmel. His ex-wife's lawyers used his draft objection in custody hearings, arguing he was unfit to raise his children. For 6 months, Clint Eastwood essentially disappeared from Hollywood. He retreated to a small ranch, seriously considering whether his acting career was over at 38. The army rejected his moral objection appeal and ordered him to report for duty. He prepared himself for the possibility of prison, just like Ali was facing. But then something unexpected happened. The army itself quietly reclassified him as 4F, too old, too famous, too politically complicated. They didn't want another celebrity circus. Ali's case was already dominating headlines, dividing the country, creating a spectacle the military wanted to avoid. So they let Clint slip through the cracks. No fanfare, no announcement, just a quiet administrative decision that saved his career but left him carrying a secret that weighed heavier than any film role ever could. While Muhammad Ali stood in courtrooms defending his decision in front of the world, Clint Eastwood returned to Hollywood with a handshake agreement with studio executives. Don't talk about it. Don't make waves. Just make movies and keep your politics to yourself. And he did. He rebuilt his career film by film, becoming the symbol of American masculinity and toughness. The man with no name who feared nothing. But inside, he carried the knowledge that he'd made the same choice as Ali, paid a real price for it, but never had to face the public judgment that Ali endured daily. For 13 years, Clint watched Ali's career resurrection, his return to boxing, his continued activism. And for 13 years, he wondered if Ali knew there were others who had resisted quietly. Others who had drawn the same moral line but hadn't had the courage to draw it in public. The truth was about to come out in the most unexpected way. Keep watching because what happens next still gives people chills. And seriously, hit that like button if this story is hitting different than you expected. Where in the world are you watching from? The Dick Cavett Show, March 15, 1981. The stage was set for a celebration of American icons. Dick had assembled what he called legends of sports and cinema. Muhammad Ali was there, charismatic as ever, entertaining the audience with his quick wit. Also on the guest list were a renowned filmmaker, a famous musician, and Clint Eastwood, who had specifically asked to be on this particular episode. When Ali walked onto the stage, the audience erupted. When Clint walked out moments later, the energy shifted. These two had never met. Never crossed paths. Moved in completely different worlds. Dick introduced them with enthusiasm. Two of America's greatest, meeting for the first time. Clint extended his hand with his trademark calm demeanor, that slight Eastwood smile. Ali looked at the hand, then directly into Clint's eyes, and his expression hardened in a way that caught everyone off guard. "I don't shake hands with men who stayed silent while brothers went to war," Ali said, his voice carrying across the suddenly quiet studio. The audience gasped. Dick tried to laugh it off, thinking maybe this was planned drama. But Ali's face showed this was real. Clint's hand remained extended, completely steady. No anger flashed across his face, no defensive posture, just a slight nod as if he'd expected this exact reaction. He took one step closer to Ali, close enough that the microphones barely picked up his next words. "You think you're the only one who paid a price, champ?" The question hung in the air. Ali's confident expression flickered with confusion. "I never sent anyone anywhere," Clint continued, his voice still quiet but firm. "I refused my own draft notice in May 1968, same year you fought yours in court." The studio went completely silent. You could hear someone in the back cough. Ali's eyes widened, searching Clint's face for the lie, for the joke, for the angle. "That's impossible," Ali said, but his voice carried uncertainty now. "You were making movies. You were the cowboy, the tough guy. You would have shouted it from the rooftops." Clint reached into his jacket pocket slowly, pulled out a folded yellow document, and held it up. "This is a copy of my 4F classification appeal, filed May 14, 1968, rejected on moral objection to the conflict. I lost 3 major film contracts that year. My agent dropped me. Studios blacklisted me for 6 months. I just did it quietly." Ali stared at the document like it was written in a foreign language. "Why?" he finally asked, his voice almost a whisper now. Why didn't you stand with us? Why didn't you go public? Clint's answer cut through the studio like a knife. Because I'm not you, Mohammed. You had the platform. You had the voice. You were the heavyweight champion of the world. When you spoke, people listened whether they agreed or not. I was a B-movie cowboy who got lucky with a few spaghetti westerns. Nobody cared what I thought about the war. But I couldn't kill for something I didn't believe in. So I did what I had to do and kept my head down. Ali's hands dropped to his sides. The anger drained from his face, replaced by something more complex. Confusion, recognition, maybe even shame. You let them call you a patriot, Ali said slowly. You let them make you the symbol of American toughness while you had refused the same thing I refused. Clint's response was simple and devastating. I let them think whatever they needed to think so I could survive. You chose to be a symbol. I chose to be invisible. We both paid for our choices. Just in different ways. The camera caught the exact moment Ali's entire body language changed. His shoulders dropped. His jaw unclenched. He looked at Clint Eastwood like he was seeing him for the first time. What happened next wasn't planned. Dick Cavett tried to cut to commercial, but Ali held up his hand. No, let's talk about this. This is important. He turned fully toward Clint, ignoring the cameras, ignoring the audience. How many others were there? How many quiet ones? Clint pulled a small worn notebook from his inside pocket. I've been keeping track for years, he said. Every name I heard about through back channels. Every actor who lost roles. Every athlete who retired early. Every musician who left the country. Every regular guy who went to prison and nobody wrote articles about him. He opened the notebook and started reading names. Tommy Morrison, baseball prospect with the Detroit Tigers, refused draft, never played professional ball again. James Chen, jazz pianist, fled to Canada in 1969, died in Vancouver in 1977, nobody at his funeral knew he'd been a resistor. Robert Williams, high school teacher, father of 3, served 18 months in federal prison, lost his teaching license, worked construction the rest of his life. David Green, stunt performer in Hollywood, refused induction, blacklisted, ended up working as a mechanic in Arizona. Clint kept reading. Ali stood there, completely still, listening to every name. The studio audience was silent, many of them crying. These weren't famous people. These weren't symbols or icons. These were regular men who had drawn the same line Ali drew, who refused to kill for a war they didn't believe in, and who paid prices that history never recorded. Some lost careers. Some lost families. Some lost their freedom. All of them lost their anonymity because in small towns across America, everyone knew who had refused and who had served. When Clint finally closed the notebook, he looked at Ali. I count 47 names in here, and I know that's just a fraction. There are probably hundreds more I'll never hear about. Men who made the choice in silence and disappeared into normal lives. You were the loud one, Mohammed. You were the one who took the spotlight and all the hate that came with it. But you weren't alone. You just didn't know it. Ali's eyes were glistening now. He reached out and took the notebook from Clint's hands, holding it like it was something sacred. These men, Ali said quietly, his voice thick with emotion. America doesn't know these men. That needs to change, Clint said. And I think you and I are the ones who need to change it. Right here on this show, in front of everyone watching, Ali extended his hand to Clint again. This time it wasn't a greeting. It was a pact. This is where the story takes a turn that nobody expected. Stay with me because what they did next created a legacy that's still impacting lives today. Smash that subscribe button so you don't miss stories like this. And tell me in the comments, where are you watching from right now? After the show, backstage in Dick Cavett's green room, something profound happened between these two men. The cameras were off. The audience was gone. It was just Ali and Clint, sitting across from each other with coffee cups neither of them were drinking. Clint reached into his jacket one more time and pulled out a small object wrapped in cloth. He unwrapped it slowly to reveal a military pin, bronze and worn, with a small crack across the eagle's wing. This was given to me in 1969, Clint said quietly. A soldier I met at a VA hospital. He'd lost his leg in Vietnam, came home angry and broken. Somehow he found out about my draft case through a friend who worked in military administration. Instead of being angry at me for refusing, he thanked me. Said he wished more people had said no, so kids like him wouldn't have been sent to die. He unpinned this from his old uniform and gave it to me. Said I fought the real battle. I've carried it ever since, feeling like I didn't deserve it. Clint placed it in Ali's hand. I want you to have this now. Because you did fight the real battle, publicly, loudly, at the cost of everything. You earned this more than I ever did. Ali held the pin, his thumb running over the cracked eagle. Then he slowly removed a leather cord from around his neck, a simple pendant hanging from it. My mother gave me this, Ali said, the day I refused induction. She told me, stand for what's right even if you stand alone. I wore this through the trial, through the ban, through every threat and every piece of hate mail. He placed the cord around Clint's neck. You didn't stand alone, brother. You just stood quiet. But you still stood. They sat in silence for a moment, both wearing pieces of each other's journey. Then Ali spoke again. We're going to find every name in that notebook. We're going to tell their stories. And we're going to make sure America knows that resistance wasn't just the famous faces. It was fathers, teachers, musicians, workers. Regular men who refused to kill and got forgotten for it. 14 months later, Muhammad Ali and Clint Eastwood stood together at the Vietnam Veterans Memorial in Washington, D.C., but they weren't there for the war's heroes. They were there to unveil something new. A smaller memorial nearby, funded entirely by their own money and donations from supporters. The Wall of Quiet Resistance, it was called. 847 names were engraved on black granite. Every name Clint had in his notebook. Every name they tracked down through military records, through interviews, through family members who'd stayed silent for decades. Some of the men on that wall were still alive, standing in the crowd, many of them crying as they saw their names honored for the first time in their lives. Some were dead, but their children and grandchildren had come to finally understand what their fathers had sacrificed. The documentary they created together, Voices of the Silent, won awards and changed conversations across America. It showed that courage isn't always loud. That standing for principle costs different people different things. That judgment often comes from ignorance of the full story. Looking back at that studio moment when Ali refused Clint's handshake, both men would later say it was the most important misunderstanding of their lives. Because sometimes the people we judge the hardest are fighting the same battles we are, just in ways we can't see. Sometimes the quietest resistance is the most costly. And sometimes it takes 13 years for truth to surface in a way that heals instead of divides. If this story made you see courage differently, if it reminded you not to judge what you don't fully understand, then hit that subscribe button because we're bringing you more true stories that change how you see history. Drop a comment about someone you misjudged before knowing their full story. And tell me, where in the world are you watching this from? Because the greatest acts of courage often happen in silence, and it's time we make some noise about them.